We'll be hearing from the government a little bit later, but joining us now on Breakfast ahead of that vote in the Commons today is Daisy Cooper, who's Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. So the Labour government says it just can't afford to keep giving the winter fuel payment to every pensioner. What do you say to that?
Well, there's absolutely no doubt that the Conservatives have left the economy and the public finances in a terrible, terrible state. But we Liberal Democrats think that this is the wrong decision, and we're urging the Labour Party to think again and take actions in place for the most vulnerable pensioners.
I suppose the government might say, well, that's easy to say from the opposition benches.
Could, if they wanted, on a one-off basis, give out a sort of cost of living style payment they did a few years ago.
But is Keir Starmer really going to think again on this? I mean, this is his first really big test, isn't it? Give us an example of that kind of compromise option that you think might be possible. You've given us some suggestions already.
Let Parliament debate them again. Debate them today. Please think again and act quickly.
At the same time, another huge political story this morning is the release of 1,700 prisoners to try to free up some room in our jails across England and Wales. Do you think the government has any option other than that to take that kind of action today?
I think it's criminal that the Conservatives let our justice system get into this state. I have to say the decision that's being taken today is pretty stomach-churning to watch and to listen to. But quite frankly, I can't see that there is any alternative. So, I mean, in the long term, there are actions the government will need to take, whether it's looking at sentencing or expanding prison places. But today, my thoughts are with the victims who may not know that their perpetrators are being released onto the streets. I think many of us will be concerned that some of the prisoners that are being released, apparently, if reports are to be believed, don't have a home to go to or won't have finished their qualifications, which are critical to rehabilitation. So there's no doubt that this was a really tough decision to make, and I think the blame lies squarely at the feet of the last Conservative government.
As Liberal Democrats, you're in quite a difficult position now, aren't you? Because you've said repeatedly that you blame the Conservatives. For how long can you say that and not blame Labour in government?
Well, the Conservatives were in power on their own for a long time, 9 years. And there's no doubt that the Labour government can't clear it all up in just 2 months. It's only been 2 months since the general election, and of that time, there's only been about three weeks where Parliament has been sitting. So it's going to take quite some time, I think, for the government to clear up the mess of the Conservatives. But as I say, Liberal Democrats will be a constructive opposition, and if we think the government's doing the right thing, we'll say so. But where we think they're getting it wrong, we will hold them to account, we'll hold their feet to the fire, and we'll call on them to make different decisions. Daisy
Cooper from the Liberal Democrats. Thanks for joining us.
It's 20 to 7, and John is out this morning. He's talking about.
The government says it welcomes Dame Rachel's report, and its new children's wellbeing bill will require councils to have and maintain registers of those not in school. Around 1,700 prisoners in England and Wales are being released from jail early today as the government attempts to tackle overcrowding. It won't apply to those convicted of sex offences and some violent crimes. Charities are concerned that some convicted of domestic abuse offences may still be released. The Justice Secretary is Shabana Mahmood.
The best way to make this change was to exclude all of those offences that we know are connected to domestic abuse, like non-fatal strangulation, like stalking offences. But we've also implemented this change in a way that we believe has given the probation service the time that they need to prepare, to notify victims, to get early release plans in place.
MPs will vote later on the government's plan to cut winter fuel payments.
It's 7 o'clock on Tuesday, the 10th of September. The headlines this morning: the government has begun releasing prisoners early in England and Wales as part of efforts to ease overcrowding. MPs will vote today on whether to support plans to stop winter fuel payments to millions of pensioners.
The government has begun releasing offenders early from jails in England and Wales to try to ease overcrowding. Around 1,700 inmates are expected to be freed today as part of a scheme intended to make available up to 5,500 prison places. The Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, said ministers had taken every measure available to protect the public, but concerns have been expressed about offender rehabilitation and ensuring victims are safe. Here's our home and legal correspondent, Dominic Casciani.
Today's releases immediately reduce the prison population in England and Wales and create breathing space for prison officers who say they are battling to keep institutions safe. The The scheme to release offenders on licence after they've spent 40% of their sentence locked up excludes those convicted of sexual offences, domestic abuse crimes and serious violence, but it's not without risks. Those released will spend their first day of freedom meeting probation officers and learning of their licence restrictions. But despite almost 2 months of planning, it's unclear whether they'll all have a place to sleep. Rehabilitation charities fear many will struggle to find work because they have not finished prison courses in time. There's little opposition to the scheme at Westminster, as the plans were drawn up by the Conservatives earlier this year. But Charlie Taylor, the Chief Inspector of Prisons, has said the government must now take sustained, decisive action to make life safer within jails and protect communities when people are released.
MPs will vote later today on government plans to restrict the winter fuel payment. Separately, Sir Keir Starmer is due to warn the trade union Congress that more tough decisions are on the way.
Sir Keir Starmer's huge majority means that today's vote won't change that.
Adina Campbell, BBC News.
Well, our reporter Megan Owen is outside Wormwood Scrubs prison in West London for breakfast this morning. And Megan, what are we likely to see there and right across the country over the next few hours?
Well, all we've seen so far is a flurry of prison staff arriving for the morning, but we are expecting some of those early release prisoners to be walking through the gates of HMP Wormwood Scrubs in just a few hours once the court vehicles have arrived. And in terms of who they are, well, a reminder that they have sentences of under 5 years, so for crimes such as shoplifting or fraud. And the process today will involve them speaking to a probation officer to make sure that they've understood the restrictions on their release, including curfews or bans on certain areas relating to their crime or approaching victims. But the real concern is that many of them could be being released homeless. In fact, figures show that up until in the year up to March this year, 12% of prisoners released didn't have a home to go to. So many critics are concerned that they'll be walking out of the gates, they'll get back on the streets and re-offend pretty quickly. Well, of course, the government say that this is a measure that needs to happen to stop overcrowding. They say that it will help cut prison spending by £200 million, but campaigners say that that money should be used to help resettle these former prisoners.
OK, Megan, for now, thank you very much indeed. We'll speak to Megan again as the programme goes on. And that isn't the only controversial measure that the government is dealing with this morning, Sal.